The Nintendo Switch is no Wii U. We knew that much when we reviewed it 2 years ago. Its portable design lets you play your games anywhere, and it seamlessly turns into a home console when you dock it, something that still feels magical today. And best of all, you can hand off one of its controls to a friend for some quick head-to-head action. While Sony and Microsoft chased the specter of high-end 4K gaming, Nintendo once again took a different path, one that ultimately led to its most innovative console yet. Now that it's been a few years since it launched, let's take a look to see how it still holds up. There's no doubt the Switch is a success. So far, Nintendo has sold over 32 million units, outpacing both the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One at this point in their lifetimes. That's not a huge surprise. Unlike Sony and Microsoft's consoles, which share plenty of titles and PC-like hardware, the Switch is a unique beast. It has the advantage of Nintendo's strong lineup of first-party titles, and of course, it's the only truly portable console. Instead of just competing with other systems, the Switch makes for an excellent companion alongside them too. It wasn't all smooth sailing though. It took Nintendo nearly 2 years to launch Switch Online, its first premium console network. At $20 a year, it's a third of what you have to pay for the PlayStation Plus and Xbox Live, and it also gives you access to a slew of NES titles. While Switch Online is a great deal, it's still a bit confusing for some consumers since Nintendo offered free multiplayer on its titles like Mario Kart 8 and Splatoon 2 for the years ahead of launch. Having to pay for something that simply just worked before is kinda jarring. Nintendo being Nintendo, there are a few other quirks with Switch Online as well. It finally brings cloud saves to the system, so you won't have to worry about losing your 200-hour Breath of the Wild save if you lose your Switch. But that feature doesn't work with every game. Titles like Splatoon 2 and Pokemon Let's Go simply aren't supported. Nintendo claims it's limiting the feature to avoid cheating, but that doesn't really make much sense when other unsupported titles like Dark Souls Remastered and FIFA 19 get cloud saves on other platforms. Maybe the feature came too late for the developers to adopt it. Hopefully we'll see wider support for cloud saves with this year's games. And then there's voice chatting. You have to use Nintendo's Android or iPhone app to talk with your friends for most titles. I could see why Nintendo chose this route. By bringing the feature to your phone, you can easily control your chats without trudging through console menus. But it also means you have to juggle another device, which makes voice chat far less seamless than it is with the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Basically, it feels like voice chatting was either an afterthought for Nintendo, or they just overthought it and misjudged how gamers actually want to use it. At least there's an alternative. Fortnite uses the third-party service Vivox for voice chat, which lets you plug in a headset and microphone into the Switch. That could eventually make its way to other titles. Epic Games also announced that it'll be developing its own voice chat system that'll work across every gaming platform, even PC and mobile. As for playing games with people over the internet, Switch Online works the way you expect. It doesn't take very long to find matches on Super Smash Bros. Ultimate or Mario Kart 8, and network performance is typically solid. Of course, that depends on how good your Wi-Fi is too. It's hard to be impressed though, given that Nintendo is so late to having a unified online service. There's certainly room for things to get better. Nintendo surprised everyone by making Tetris 99, a Battle Royale-esque version of the classic puzzler, a free download for Switch Online subscribers. And an intrepid fan found some references to upcoming SNES titles on the service, which would be a huge upgrade over the NES game so far. Nintendo says it doesn't plan to launch a virtual console on the Switch, which is how you previously got access to retro games on its earlier consoles. But that might not matter much if Switch Online gets a more robust library of titles, and the company can always sell older titles directly on the eShop. Game compilations like Capcom's Street Fighter Collection are also a worthy alternative. For the price of a single game, you get access to a bunch of faithfully rendered older titles. While Switch Online is the single biggest addition to the system since its launch, Nintendo has also been incrementally improving the console. And in the process, it addressed many of the concerns of our original review. For one, there are plenty of games to choose from. Of course, the biggest releases come from Nintendo and its partners, but the Switch has also become a haven for indie titles like Hollow Knight and Dead Cells. Just like on Steam, the bounty of choices makes it tough to tell what's worth playing sometimes. It'd be nice if Nintendo offered a more curated experience through the eShop, or at least a way to better filter what you're looking for. Since the Switch is significantly less powerful than other consoles, it can't exactly compete when it comes to AAA titles. But there is one way that could change. In Japan, Nintendo's also letting developers stream some high-end titles to the Switch, including Phantasy Star Online 2, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and Resident Evil 7. That's a clever workaround for the system's meager specs, but given the complexity of game streaming, it would be hard for developers to offer those titles outside of Japan. That would involve setting up data centers across the world, and they'd have to deal with the varying quality of internet access in other countries. Nintendo cut a lot of flack for not including Bluetooth headphone support at launch, and unfortunately, it looks like that's something we'll never see with this model. One possibility is that it could interfere with the Joy-Con's wireless connection, which also relies on Bluetooth. If you're desperate, you could always pick up an external Bluetooth adapter and just plug it into the Switch's aux port. Nintendo also threw us a bone by adding support for wireless headphones that rely on USB dongles, but that's still an imperfect solution. They only work when the Switch is docked, and not every dongle headset is supported. If you're planning to make the wireless jump, be sure to check online to see if the headphones you want actually work. One big surprise with the Switch so far is that its hardware has held up pretty well. I've dropped mine several times and the screen is still scratch-free. It's traveled with me all over the world, and the system has survived being stuffed into my backpack alongside my computer and other gear. I'm also surprised that my Joy-Cons and Pro Controller still feel pretty responsive, even after hundreds of hours of gameplay. Of course, that's just my experience. Some Switch owners I know have had to open up their Joy-Cons to clean them out with compressed air. And there are still widespread complaints about the left Joy-Con's Bluetooth reception. The only real issue I've noticed is that the sliding rails for the Joy-Cons wear out easily. I don't even have to hit the eject button to yank out my left controller anymore. That hasn't been a huge issue for me, but I could see it being a problem if it flies out in the middle of a Fortnite round. The Switch's battery life hasn't gotten much worse either. I can still get close to 3 hours of playtime with graphics-heavy titles like Zelda. Nintendo's decision to go with USB-C for charging was clearly the right one. Now that plenty of smartphones and laptops use that standard, I'm rarely far from a spare USB-C cable. And external battery packs are also cheaper than ever, and they're a great option if you're going to be stuck in a long flight without onboard power. Looking ahead, there are clearly several ways Nintendo could improve the Switch. I'd personally love an alternative Joy-Con with an actual D-pad. There are some third-party options available, but they don't really feel nearly as great as a proper Nintendo pad. And while it's nice to see the system becoming a haven for indie games, Nintendo still has to do more to court developers. The latest rumors point to a smaller and cheaper Switch coming later this year, but that doesn't seem like it's meant to replace the current model. Instead, it seems more like how the 2DS offered a more inexpensive way for kids to play 3DS titles. A cheaper Switch would make a lot of sense, since Nintendo hasn't budged from the system's $300 launch price. There's still a chance that could get reduced later this year. So far, retailers have just discounted game bundles during the holidays to tempt shoppers. As for a true Switch successor, there's clearly room for Nintendo to offer a larger, higher resolution screen while shaving down those chunky bezels. It would also be great to see more secure Joy-Con rails, more refined buttons on the controllers, and of course, more power under the hood. As I think about where the Switch could be headed, it's hard not to notice that it's genuinely more exciting than the competition. Microsoft and Sony will both continue to play the same hardware game, building boxes that might as well be gaming PCs. Maybe ray tracing will actually be ready next year, when we expect their next systems. That would offer a slight bit of rendering and lighting improvement. And maybe we'll finally get the perfect wireless VR solution for living rooms. But meanwhile, Nintendo will continue to sail into our uncharted waters. The next Switch probably won't be able to compete with the competition when it comes to hardware, but just like today, that really won't matter at all.